All right, we'll get started. I'm actually going to be talking about how to tolerate unruly surety growers and how to successfully punish them. But since that's impossible, I'm going to talk about cultivator and sprayer BMPs. We've been using cultivation as a good weed control strategy for generations. All the older generations knew what they knew about row crop cultivation because they had that as their option. And over the last few generations, we've seen a general slow decline in that, you know, with more reliance on herbicide programs to take care of the weeds. And you know, if we're seeing some more of that glyphosate tolerant problem keep coming up, then we need to maybe think about throwing this back into the weed control program. What else do we get out of row crop cultivation? Of course, we kill the weeds, and we like that. We can get some topsoil aeration out of it. And, you know, if we're sitting soggy for the first month and the beets really aren't taking off, it's kind of nice to get out there and open that topsoil up and get them to take off. We can help the topper and the lifter stay on the row a little better. BMP number one, put it up. Top big in January. Then we get, you know, mid-May, the end of May, and trying to get done with the spike beans and come with it to the yard. You know, I didn't see that many boat hooked up last night anyway in the fishing. So if we don't try it, we don't commit to it, we don't know if it can be a really effective weed control program. By using a oldie but a goodie 6 or an 8 row or a brand new 36 row, we've got a lot of options out there. You know, it's still going to take some time. A lot of guys don't want to spend the time sitting out there at 1 to 3, maybe 4 miles an hour. But if we have the implement for the job, we can still use this as a valuable tool. You know, there's been many manufacturers over the years that have made different models, but newer models are utilizing better shields, different shanks, last a little longer, different shovel options that really can give us a lot to offer there. And even, you know, things like helping out your swath control and your sway control so you can keep it on the row and not get Grandpa's cultivator blight. So this is what Dad and Grandpa did. So what does that mean for how I do it successfully? Trying to relearn, we just got to ask. There's still the diehards out there that have been doing it year after year and have had success with it. You just got to take the time. We need to ask them about the speed and depth they're running. We need to ask them if it's matching up to our planter or not. You know, I don't know of a 48-row cultivator out there to match a 48-row planter, but we can make other scenarios work. Shank configuration, whether you're running regular S tines or C shanks, size of the beets and the size of the water hemp, we want to be careful with our timing there and how big that stuff is when we get out. Project for preparing the interrow cultivation we were doing with seed guides were being affected by. We're going to get into some data in a little bit here. How we kind of either maintain that barrier or away from it. We want to make sure we're not affecting our yield, taking away our tons of sugar by any result of the cultivation. Where is your cultivator though? Is it in the shed, ready to rock, cleaned up and ready to go, all greased up? Or is it in the grove? We need to pull it out of there and give it a quick once over before we start going through the field again. Or maybe your neighbor's got one. If you don't, maybe he's willing to let you borrow it or run over a few acres for you for a nominal fee. start looking at the auctions or the dealerships if we need to get a new one. So the North Dakota Weed Control Guide. There, depending on you cut it off and get through it. And in general, when the beets are small, we want to run the shields down to keep them protected and not bury them with the dirt. As the beets continue to get bigger, we start lifting those shields up so we're not cutting those leaves off because we need them to help fill our canopy. In general, we want to keep the speed down. So if we got smaller beets, we might need to keep that speed a little lower if the shields aren't able to fully protect them. But we're trying to keep that dirt from getting thrown in the ground for two reasons. You know, we don't want to bury them and we don't want to be throwing any rhizoc inoculum into the ground. So do we need to worry about the shovels? Like I said, there's a lot of options out there now if we're running huge sweeps or you know, different S-tine setups with the 3 shanks. Whatever Dad and Grandpa did, it worked for them, and we can make the old way work for us or find a new way too. Larger water hemp, if we're running a 3-tine setup, some of those larger ones will be able to stay rooted and hang on in between the shovels. So we just want to watch that, and that's part of the timing deal too. Again, the size of the water hemp, the bigger they get, the harder they're going to be to cut off. Speed's always going to be dependent on those conditions. You know, if we're a little bit wetter yet, trying to get out there, we might need to be a little less careful or a little more careful. It just depends on that and the size of the crop. But cultivation is not really effective on incorporating those lay-by chloroacetamides. But what we ended up looking at is that it's not really going in the wrong direction either. So 4-inch water hemp, sure, we can take them out. That's what we're really wanting to go after with this. And if we can time it, so we're hitting it right before that second lay-by, about that 8-leaf stage, then we can follow up and make that chloroacetamide application and have the barrier there. And then we're going after those glyphosate-resistant plants, obviously, that have made it past the first Roundup application. This shows some of Nathan's data from his project, and this shows 4 different site years. So we've got the observations of 14 and 28 days after. We can see what our water hemp control is, and we're seeing about an 11 to 12% better control by adding cultivation to the process. And if, say, we're running a 15-inch sweep through a 22-inch row, that's how we're getting to 67% removal of the existing weeds overall. Here we can see the differences of the lay-by programs combined with glyphosate and without the chloroacetamide, just glyphosate alone. We are getting statistically better results just by adding cultivation here. So if we're getting that 50 to 75% less water hemp range 14 days after the cultivation and being able to maintain that, we have that much fewer water hemp to deal with. So again, that in that range where we're taking out the water hemp in the cultivated pass. Generally had no effect on the new water hemp emergence. So Nathan and his team kind of coined the term that after they went out with the cultivator, were they going to be germinating new water hemp? The problem was that on occasion there's, but they weren't getting more than the cultivator without the cultivator pass. This shows the site years from 2017. What happened in one more site year in Lake Lillian here, you can kind of see similar results. where we had a developed canopy kind of in a timely manner and no rain to really bring about any new water hemp. But what happened up in Gal Chute, they found the canopy was underdeveloped. They maybe made that cultivator pass a little bit early, and it was taking a while for that canopy to come along, and in the meantime, they got 4 inches of rain. So there was plenty of opportunity for any new water hemp to come up through that, and chloroacetamide or not, 4 inches of rain might be enough to really change that environment and allow some to come through. If we can get those weed escapes by that 8-leaf stage and still be able to make that chloroacetamide application to get a barrier there afterward, that's something to target. Common lamb's quarter is a little bit different to where it's more, so if we don't have to be developing yet, we're turning over that soil. More common lamb's quarter germinating to be able to come through to make repair. Again, the control better. Density of those seeds. And we don't need to worry about losing the barrier. Data showed that we weren't sacrificing by making a cultivator pass and breaking the barrier. How are we affecting the yield? We don't want to take a hit on tons or sugar. Are we worried about the rhizoctonia? Of course. Tom had talked to a grower from up in the valley. Said, I've always been told our best fight against rhizoctonia is working the cultivators as much as possible. And as a general, 10, 15 years ago, we saw that it's true. Since then, we've implemented a lot of different rhizoctonia management practices that Ashok kind of touched on this morning. We're doing a lot of things differently that are allowing us to really not see those bad results from the rhizoc after maybe throwing some dirt in the crown. We've been incorporating the seed treatments, the in-furrow fungicides, the banded and foliar fungicides, as well as picking varieties that are below a 4.0 on rhizoc for those fields. And this is these are all good reasons why, you know, we just generally don't see the rhizoc disasters after cultivation that we used to. In Nathan's data, you can see this is all kind of metric here, but the important thing here is that no matter if we were making 1 cultivator pass, 2 or 3 at different timings, we were not affecting the yield or the sugar. They had no. As for our APD surveys, we had 302 total fields participating that filled out the survey for this question in 21 and 284 in 22. So just shy of a third of our fields. And where 0 cultivator passes were made, going to 1 cultivator pass raised our aesthesis score by 35 points. And if we're able to see a little bit of consistency out of that, it's not necessarily going the wrong way, whether it's rhizoc or not. To summarize, we're getting that 11 to 12%. And those newly emerged seedlings are always going to depend on how our canopy development is going. Single pass, and if we're making that single pass before 8-leaf or right before canopy closure, that's all dependent on, you know, what else we got going. We're still spraying other crops or doing other things. If we got the time to make 2 passes, and I'd say we should do it. No yield hit. And there's always going to be other questions we can't answer about this if we're just doing a little bit of research here and there and the general observations. You know, we want to know what you're doing out there too. If you're finding something that works better than what we know, we want to hear about it. Cultivators really haven't lost their luster when we've been adding new crop genetics and new agronomic practices. So they're still going to be a valuable tool going forward. Now we'll talk about field cultivation a little bit, and incorporating those pre-emerge fungicides. A lot of the guys who've been going out meeting for seed orders, this topic has come up a little more often recently. And back in the late 70s and into the early 80s, Alan DEXTER and some of his colleagues did a few trials to kind of compare what PPI application versus just a pre-emerge broadcast application looked like. And at 4 of the 7 locations, they were able to see a pretty significant difference, getting the better control where they did incorporate the herbicide. At 3 of the locations, however, there was no difference. So we're not really sure what all the differences were and what all the conditions may have been that caused that, but there was differences. That was most likely what it was. And they also tested incorporation depth. You know, whatever product is being used, if we want to target that weed seed zone where that seed is going to be germinating, that's where we need to have the product. So they tested in this trial 1, 2, and 4 inch depths. And, you know, if we can hit that 2 inch zone with all the product, that's really where we need it to be effective against that weed seed. They also tested different types of tillage equipment. And, you know, this is 40 years ago. This equipment has all changed, but you can kind of see that some of the lighter, the older style field cultivators and your multi-weeders, that type of thing, aggressively incorporating things and getting that stuff mixed well. How they knew that was this particular trial, they went out at night and sprayed a dye out in the field. And whether it was a UV light or a black light, to be able to see that dye after the tillage passed, they were going through and evaluating how well that product was incorporated. And comparing the different cultivation tools, they were able to see that, okay, maybe I'm getting a little bit better mixing, maybe I'm going a little too deep, but I'm getting this stuff incorporated, at least getting it mixed in. So they were able to see good differences there. And obviously there's been some changes since then. So we've talked a lot about maybe there's other tillage implements we can be using to help incorporate this stuff, whether we're putting out or whatever products we choose. You know, something like a heavy drag sprayer type scenario for lower residue situations. You know, super weeder, multi-weeder types, it's more of a finishing tool. And they would be capable of incorporating, but it's not going to get that high level of mixing and at the depth we need it maybe. But other finishing options on the back of a cultivator or single pass by themselves may be viable for helping incorporate that stuff. You see a lot of your Tiger Mate 2 diggers out there, no matter how big they are and what setups they are, or a 2230 type, similar heavier field cultivators, a lot more mixing and uniformity of seed bed, better seed bed. Back. A little bit better mixing down there. A lot of the newer ones also will have, like John Deere's True Set. Other companies make active depth control to be able to at least monitor how deep you're maintaining that tillage depth. What about vertical tillage? Is that something that we can use to incorporate it? We'd have a better ability to size, incorporate higher residues. But are we putting that? Well, because that's where the weed seed is going to be germinating. It kind of makes sense with a fall or a winter cover crop. If we've got a higher residue level in the spring, maybe we need to size it up with that type of tool, but we still need to know what any potential drawbacks would be for being able to incorporate. We don't have a lot of experience in doing this, so If there's other tillage tools that you think we should try, we'd be glad to hear about them. In summary, we want to be at that 2 to 3 inch depth and not really any deeper. Speed is good, mainly from a mixing standpoint. We're getting that incorporation to be a lot more even if we maintain that speed through the field, whatever the speed needs to be. If it's 8 miles an hour, it's 8 miles an hour. Harrows and crumblers, depending on whatever finisher is on your cultivator already, that plays a critical role in getting that stuff uniform in the back. Things like a little harrow aren't going to be effective by themselves. So we'll get into a little bit about sprayers. We want to think of, our different applications. Getting the spray day. What do I need to worry about? We're going to touch on each one of these things briefly. We're going to talk about volume, nozzle selection, droplet size, what the boom height needs to be or should be, different environments, chemistry, mixing order, and clean out. All these things will affect how your application is going to have high or low efficacy or just a general success level through the season. Before we get out there and hook up the fill hose and fire up the pump, we need to think about what our program is going into the season. General time to be applied before we get out there and just start shoving and stuff up. When it comes to spray volume, it's always going to be affected by speed, your nozzles, and your pressure. For non-systemics like our protected fungicides and our contact herbicides, we want to be in that 20+ gallon range. Like David was saying, we have a real specific target that we want to get to for that volume and coverage. Your systemics like glyphosate, we want to be down maybe in an 8 to 15 gallon range. And then one is no. We want to be able to maintain that volume throughout the field. As for nozzle selection, there's flat fans, twin jets, and all kinds of jets. There's a reason that the manufacturers make switching them out. We need to look up what the other nozzles be able to do for us and get information. So if we got a three nozzle selector, a 5 nozzle selector, that's what we need to do. Roll them off of there and smell them. They're not really targeting our ideal application. We're doing many different things, but should we be making it do many different things? On your pinpoint type systems, aim command, whatever, we want to make sure that our nozzles are matching up with this as well. Your droplet size is going to matter when it comes to this. So your spray pattern is always going to have a droplet spectrum. And David touched on this, that we want to have that droplet spectrum within a certain droplet size range to be able to maximize the coverage and get the best efficacy out of a product. If we have a third of our droplet spectrum at the desired range, it almost doesn't matter because the rest of the product is in a way that it's falling down like raindrops and running right off. We're maxing that out. That droplet spectrum. You got huge raindrops pouring off the edge of the and everywhere else. Use deposition aids. What they really help to do is they'll help to keep those droplet sizes within the desired spectrum. Winfield's really good at having a lot of these aids for showing what our sprays are doing. If we look at 100 micron size compared to a 600 micron, advantages and disadvantages of both of those sizes. But if we can target, say, a 200 to 300 micron range for making those high volume applications, we're not giving up the disadvantages on the small droplet size and the large droplet size. When it comes to your sprayer height, we don't want to be crop dusting. We don't want to be listening to the boogie wheel sing, ripping leaves up. David had a slide on this, and it is in the book. All we got to do is look. So yeah, for those 80-degree nozzles, we want to be 30 inches above the canopy, and for the 110s, we want to be 20 inches above. There's always going to be a few differences with different nozzles in the book, but they're going to have a general recommended boom height for those specific nozzles. They're designed to have a certain overlap, and the wind speed is always going to play a part in, if you're not maintaining that optimum boom height, if you're a couple inches too high or a couple inches too low, we're not going to have the maximum effectiveness of that application. You can kind of see the overlap in here, where if we have too many of those droplets smashing together and forming larger droplets, we are interfering that, if it's 30% of that overlap range in the middle, we don't want to negatively affect that zone too much, because then our coverage gets really different in that zone. The environment, the wind is still going to blow. The seemingly small windows to spray. I'll be like this guy and have to try to get out there in between the spray windows, between the last rain and the next rain. Eventually it is going to rain again. So we're going to be putting products out there. Every product has a different rain fast time, and we need to know, okay, is that next storm coming? Do I need to just quit? Do I need to get out of here because the rain's going to be here in 2 hours anyway? High temps, they can really affect your spray as soon as it leaves the nozzle, what it's doing even before it hits the leaf and after it hits the leaf, how it's going to dry differently and adhere differently. When it comes to humidity, if we have a lot of dew in the mornings, the dynamic of what that product is going to be able to do on the leaf. Like I said, we don't want to get rain out of the field. If that storm's coming, just pull up, get out of there. This slide shows the rain fast differences with ProLine in this case. And you can kind of see that up until really 6 hours after the application, we're going to be losing some of that product. If we want to maintain the efficacy of these products, we got to be careful with that rain fast time. Chemistry and adjuvant selection, we got to use the right tool for the job. Stick with the program and have a really good reason to call an audible mid-season. If we got to throw a different product in there or add one to it, we can do that. We just got to have a good reason. Adjuvants, we want to use the proven adjuvants that we know mix well with our products. If we're using new ones that we haven't tried before, we just got to make sure that they're going to help and not hurt. Mixing order, there's all kinds of acronyms. We got the apples, the whales, the dales, and the long legs. I don't really know what they all are, but they all kind of follow the same general trend. You want to throw your gloves on, throw your goggles on. Get your education going. And manufacturers want to see your tank half full. As long as you're getting the volume going in there and not trying to dump the whole product load through the inductor and sucking it in right away, you're going to be fine. So get that agitation going, start with your dries, get them into suspension in the tank and keep that agitation going. And you add your microencapsulated products, your liquids and your soluble concentrates, ECs, your glyphosates, followed by your surfactants. That way we don't end up with scoopable material in your sprayer tank. rather have it be sprayed out and not scooped out. So for clean out, same deal, wear your gloves. Use the proper cleaner. Certain products need specific cleaners, otherwise they won't maybe break loose. Make sure you don't leave anything hanging up in there. Main and the boom section filters should be checked. Your fill filters too. Check the ends of the boom sections. Some of that heavier stuff can settle out and hang in at the end of your boom and start to work its way back and plug that last nozzle. Don't leave a problem for next time. I want to thank the R&D board for funding some of Tom and Nathan's projects with this, and David and the rest of the research staff for helping out with those projects. Cody Wallstrom, Pat Oselski, and Joe Hastings for a little bit of consultation on the cultivation topics. And that is all I have. Any questions? We got time for one?